The human transmission cut through subspace, like a blade through silk, carrying with it something that made Mordane's chitinous exoskeleton tighten involuntarily. It wasn't fear the Kethvari had evolved beyond such primitive emotions on their acidic death world of perpetual storms and molten seas. It was recognition. "This is Admiral Kalen Rickstar of the Terran Defense Force." The transmission crackled. "You have 3 minutes to withdraw from Earth's orbital space. Before we demonstrate why humans don't negotiate with extinction." Mordane's secondary arms flexed, razor-sharp talons scraping against his command throne. Around him, his bridge. Gruich, a perfect killing machine forged by Kethver's relentless environment, shifted with predatory anticipation. They had faced the crystal-bodied Silthani, who could shatter mountains with sonic screams. They had broken the hive-mind Nexari, whose individual drones could survive in vacuum. All had knelt. "Scan their vessels," Mordane commanded, his voice a harmonious blend of clicks and subsonic growls that could paralyze most species. "Show me what these humans believe makes them special." The tactical display materialized before him, and for the first time in his 3-century career, Mordane paused. The human ships were ... primitive, chemical propulsion. Kinetic weapons, fusion reactors barely capable of interstellar travel. Their largest vessel, this Defiant, was a fraction of his dreadnought's mass. Yet something about their formation spoke to him. They moved like pack hunters, like predators. "Sir," his weapons master, Zixahol, hissed through her breathing slits. "Their ships are positioning themselves between us and their planet. They're not fleeing." "No," Mordane observed, studying the tactical readout more carefully. "They're not." The Kethvari had evolved on a world where everything from the crystalline forests to the acid storms existed to kill. They had clawed their way to the top of a food chain that included creatures capable of eating starship hulls. Their society had been forged in perpetual warfare, where only the strongest survived to reproduce. But as Mordane watched the human vessels maneuver with surgical precision, maintaining perfect formation despite facing overwhelming odds, he recognized something that sent an unfamiliar chill through his hemilymph. These creatures moved like they had been born to war. "Incoming transmission," his communications officer announced. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Rickstar. The human was smaller than Mordane had expected, lacking the obvious natural weapons of a proper predator. No claws, no fangs, no armored carapace, but his eyes, those pale blue orbs, held something that made every Kethvari on the bridge instinctively lean back. "Captain," Rickstar said, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing weather, "I assume you've run our scans by now. You know we can't match your firepower. You know we're outgunned, outmanned, and outclassed in every conventional metric." Mordane remained silent, studying this strange creature, who spoke of his own defeat with such calm certainty. "But what your scans can't tell you," Rickstar continued, and now his smile revealed those flat, grinding teeth of an omnivore. "A creature that consumed everything, is that we've never yielded, not once, not ever. Your move, Captain." The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Mordane realized he was no longer the hunter. He was prey. The first salvo lit up space like a newborn star. Mordane's dreadnought, the apex sovereign, unleashed the concentrated fury of Kethver's most advanced weaponry. Plasma torrents, capable of glassing countenance, carved through the void, followed by ion disruptor beams that could tear apart molecular bonds. The barrage would have vaporized any fleet the Dominion had previously encountered. The humans scattered like startled prey, their primitive vessels peeling away from the onslaught with surprising agility. But they didn't flee. Instead, they began to dance. "Impossible," hissed Zixahol, as her targeting systems struggled to lock on to the erratically moving human ships. "They're pulling 17G maneuvers. No organic being can survive those forces." Mordane's mandibles clicked in growing unease. The Cathvari could endure tremendous punishments. Their exoskeletons were evolved to withstand crushing pressure, and their decentralized nervous systems could function even with severe damage. But even they had limits. Sir, his sensor operator's voice carried a note of confusion. I'm detecting massive electromagnetic signatures from their engine. They're not using conventional fusion drives. On the tactical display, Admiral Rickstar's flagship, the Defiant, rolled through a spiraling attack pattern that should have liquefied any crew aboard. Its weapons, crude railguns and missile systems, spat death with mechanical precision. Most of the projectiles struck the Apex Sovereign's shields harmlessly, but a few punched through, leaving scarred craters in the hull. That shouldn't have been possible. How are their primitive weapons penetrating our defenses? Mordain demanded. The projectiles, sir, the sensor operator's voice cracked. They're not using standard materials. These rounds appear to be constructed from compressed neutronium cores wrapped in crystallized dark matter. Mordain's primary hearts skipped. Neutronium weapons were theoretical, even to the Cathvari. The energy requirements to forge such materials should have been beyond any civilization that hadn't mastered zero-point extraction. Another human Vastilla sleek destroyer designated Persistent Dove beneath the Apex Sovereign's firing arc, its engines blazing with impossible intensity. As it passed, it deployed a spread of what appeared to be simple kinetic mines. The explosions, when they came, registered as miniature supernovas. Antimatter, Zixahal breathed, her exoskeleton darkening with stress pheromones. They're using antimatter charges as area denial weapons. On ships held together with metal alloys, Mordain added quietly, pieces of a disturbing puzzle, clicking into place. These creatures, ... What kind of Deathworld spawns beings who use stellar core materials as standard ammunition? The answer came in the form of another transmission from Admiral Rickstar. The human's face filled the screen, and Mordain noticed details he had missed before. Scars crossed the Admiral's weathered features, not ceremonial markings, but evidence of survival. His uniform was practical, designed for function over intimidation, and those eyes, those pale, calculating eyes, held the patient intensity of something that had spent eons learning to kill. You're wondering about our weapons, Rickstar said, as if reading Mordain's thoughts. Wondering how a species that can barely leave its gravity well managed to weaponize the fundamental forces of reality. The captain of the Persistent appeared in a smaller window beside the Admiral, a scarred woman, whose augmented left arm gleamed with mechanical precision. Tell him about Sol. Admiral Rickstar nodded grimly. Our star is unstable, Captain Mordain. Has been for the last 50,000 years. Solar flares that make supernovas look like candle flames. Gamma radiation that strips DNA apart at the molecular level. Gravitational anomalies that compress matter into impossible configurations. He leaned forward, and his smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was the expression of an apex predator recognizing another of its kind. We didn't develop this technology, Captain. We scavenged it. Every piece of exotic matter, every impossible alloy, every weapon that shouldn't exist, we pulled it from the wreckage of our own dying system. Mordain felt something cold settle in his thorax. Your world, ... is ending. Has been ending, Rickstar corrected. For millennia, we've been living on borrowed time, building ships from the bones of collapsing stars, learning to fight with the fury of a species that has nothing left to lose. Another spread of human missiles impacted the Apex Sovereign's port batteries. The explosions visible through the reinforced transperistyle of the bridge. Emergency klaxons wailed as atmosphere vented from compromised sections. You came here expecting to find prey, Rickstar continued, his voice carrying across the chaos of battle. But Earth isn't just a world, Captain. It's a graveyard, and we're not its inhabitants. The Admiral's eyes seemed to look directly through the screen, directly into Mordain's soul. We're its undertakers. The Apex Sovereign shuddered as another antimatter charge detonated against its starboard hull. Warning indicators bathed the bridge in crimson light, while damage reports flooded in from across the massive vessel. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Captain Mordain found himself fighting a defensive battle. Hull integrity at 67%, reported his engineering chief Clythan, her voice tight with disbelief. Primary shield generators offline. The humans are targeting specific weak points with surgical precision. Mordain's compound. Eyes tracked the tactical display, watching human vessels weave through his fleet's formation with predatory grace. They moved wrong too fast, too coordinated, as if individual ships shared a collective consciousness. But these weren't hive mind drones like the Nexari. These were distinct individuals, operating in perfect harmony, a pack-hunting dynamic that spoke to something deeper than mere training. Sir Zixahal called from her weapons station. I'm reading massive power fluctuations from the human flagship. Their reactor output just increased by 400%. Admiral Rickster's face appeared on screen again, but something had changed. His pale eyes held a different quality. Now not the cold calculation of a strategist, but the focused intensity of something preparing to kill. You're studying us, he observed, as if commenting on whether good. Most species we've encountered make the mistake of underestimating evolutionary pressure. Behind him, Mordain could see the human bridge cramped, utilitarian, every surface scarred by repair work. The crew moved with mechanical efficiency, their augmentations ranging from subtle neural interfaces to replacement limbs that gleamed with military precision. They were cyborgs, he realized, beings who had voluntarily merged with their technology. Your world, Mordain found himself saying. What did it do to you? Rickstar's smile was sharp as a blade. Earth taught us that survival requires sacrifice. When the solar storms began intensifying, we had 2 choices. Die as we were, or become something that could endure. The tactical display showed the human destroyer relentless, rolling through an attack pattern that defied physics. Its captain, a young man whose skull plates had been replaced with quantum processing arrays, spoke with machine-like precision. Neural integration at maximum efficiency. Admiral, all weapon systems synchronized. The first generation nearly killed us, Rickstar continued, his voice carrying the weight of species-wide trauma. Brain-machine interfaces that fried neural pathways. Genetic modifications that turned our children into monsters. Cybernetic augmentations that rejected host tissue. Another human vessel, the Indomitable, executed a maneuver that should have torn it apart, its crew seemingly unaffected by G-forces that would crush most beings. But we learned, adapted. Those who survived passed on their improvements. Each generation became stronger, faster, more integrated with our technology. Mordain watched in fascination and horror as the human fleet began to move as one organism. Their communication channels buzzed with data streams that his translators couldn't process, not language, but pure information exchange at the speed of thought. You turned yourselves into machines, he breathed. No, corrected the captain of the Persistent, her mechanical arm interfacing directly with her ship's weapon systems. We turned ourselves into something that could use machines as extensions of our will. There's a difference. The Apex Sovereign rocked as another precisely targeted barrage struck its reactor housing. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the bridge in the sickly glow of backup illumination. Around Mordain, his crew-proud Cathvari warriors who had conquered 17 worlds began to show signs of something he had never seen before. Fear. Retreat, whispered Zixahal, her exoskeleton having shifted to the pale coloration of submission. Sir, we should withdraw, regroup, call for reinforcements. Mordain's mandibles clicked in consideration. The logical choice was retreat. His fleet was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and facing an enemy that defied every conventional understanding of warfare. But something prevented him from giving the order. A curious respect for these strange creatures who had transformed themselves in response to an impossible challenge. "Admiral," he transmitted to Rickstar, "how many of you survived the transformation?" The human's expression grew distant, haunted. "Of the original population, maybe 1 in 10,000. The rest died during the integration process, or from the genetic modifications, or simply from the psychological trauma of becoming something post-human." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of extinction. "But those who survived, ... we became something your Dominion has never encountered. We became a species that chose evolution over extinction, augmentation over death, unity over individuality." On the tactical display, every human ship suddenly synchronized their movements into a single, flowing pattern. They weren't individual vessels anymore. They were organs of a greater creature, tentacles of a distributed intelligence that spanned their entire fleet. "You want to know what makes us different from every other species you've conquered?" Rickstar asked, and his smile revealed teeth that gleamed with metallic augmentation. "We've already died once. Everything that comes after is just borrowed time." The human fleet began to accelerate toward the Kethvari formation, their weapons charging with the light of caged stars. "And we've learned to make every borrowed moment count." The Apex Sovereign died beautifully. Captain Mordain watched his flagship's death throes through the emergency escape pod's viewport, his thorax tight with emotions he couldn't name. The massive dreadnought pride of the Kethvari fleet, terror of 17 conquered worlds, broke apart in slow motion as human antimatter charges tore through its superstructure like stellar fire through tissue paper. Around him, the remnants of his bridge crew huddled in the cramped confines of the pod. Zixohel's exoskeleton had shifted to the deep blue of morning, while Clythan's breathing slits fluttered with shock-induced arrhythmia. They were survivors, refugees from a battle that had redefined their understanding of predation. The pod's communication array crackled to life. Admiral Rickstar's voice emerging from the static with the same calm precision he had maintained throughout the engagement. "Captain Mordain, we're tracking your escape pod. Do not attempt to flee the system. We need to talk. Need, not want." The distinction carried weight in the universal language of apex predators. "Sir," Zixohel whispered, her voice barely audible through the pod's recycled atmosphere. "They're not pursuing the other survivors." "Why?" Mordain studied the tactical display through the pod's limited sensors. The human fleet had indeed allowed the scattered remnants of his task force to retreat beyond the system's heliopause. They could have annihilated every Kethvari vessel, yet they had chosen mercy. The decision spoke to something that made his compound eyes narrow in concentration. These humans understood the mathematics of survival. The Defiant approached with the careful grace of a predator investigating wounded prey. Its scarred hull bore fresh damage from the engagement, proof that the Kethvari had not yielded without cost. Tractor beams enveloped the escape pod with surprising gentleness, drawing it into the human flagship's launch bay. What Mordain found inside defied his every expectation. The launch bay was a cathedral of functionality, its walls lined with automated repair systems that moved with organic fluidity. Human crew members moved through the space with the coordinated efficiency he had witnessed during the battle. But up close, he could see the full extent of their transformation. They were beautiful, in the way that perfected weapons were beautiful. The bay supervisor, her designation scrolled across Mordain's translation implant as Commander Nixara Velthan approached with mechanical precision. Half her face had been replaced with quantum processing arrays that pulsed with soft blue light, while her left arm terminated, not in flesh, but in a series of tool-tipped manipulators that constantly reconfigured themselves for optimal efficiency. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that suggested direct neural interface with the ship's communication systems. "The Admiral wishes to speak with you personally. Will you come willingly, or shall we make other arrangements?" The question was posed with perfect politeness, but Mordain could see the weapons integrated into her cybernetic systems. These humans had not abandoned courtesy. They had simply evolved beyond the need for threats. The journey through the Defiance corridors was a study in controlled evolution. Every surface served multiple purposes, walls that could reconfigure themselves into tactical displays, floors that adapted their grip patterns to optimize movement efficiency, ceilings that housed both atmospheric processors and defensive systems. This wasn't a ship. It was a living organism of metal and energy. Admiral Rickstar waited in what humans termed an observation deck, a transparent section of hull that provided an unobstructed view of space. Earth hung in the distance, a blue-green marble that seemed impossibly fragile against the cosmic void. But Mordane's enhanced vision could detect the orbital installations that surrounded it. Massive defensive platforms that bristled with the same exotic weaponry that had destroyed his fleet. Your world, Mordane said without preamble, is a fortress. Our world is a monument, Rickster corrected, his reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum, a reminder of what we used to be. The Admiral turned, and Mordane saw that his augmentations were more extensive than the others. Neural interface. Ports dotted his skull like technological scarification, while his eyes held the faint luminescence of quantum-enhanced perception. He was no longer entirely human, yet somehow more human than any being Mordane had encountered. You're wondering why we spared your survivors, Rickster observed. The thought had occurred to me. Because extinction teaches patience, the Admiral replied, moving to stand beside a holographic display that showed real-time images of the Cathvari home system. When you're the last generation of your species, you learn to think in terms of legacy rather than conquest. Mordane's exoskeleton darkened. You've surveyed our worlds. We've surveyed everyone's worlds, mapped their defenses, cataloged their capabilities, identified their weakness. Rickstar's smile held no malice, only the professional appreciation of one predator recognizing another's skill. The galaxy is full of apex predators, Captain Bot. Most of them make the same mistake your Dominion made, which is, they assume that being the apex predator means you'll always be the apex predator. The Admiral gestured toward Earth, toward the orbital fortresses that spoke of centuries of preparation. We learned differently. We learned that evolution never stops, that adaptation is the only constant, and that yesterday's apex predator is tomorrow's extinct species. The holographic display shifted, showing fleet positions throughout the local spiral arm. Cathvari Dominion forces, Silthani crystal ships, Nexari hive clusters, all of them suddenly seeming small and primitive compared to the human defensive grid. You've been watching, Mordane realized. All of you. All our conquests. Learning, Rickstar corrected. Studying, preparing. His expression grew distant, haunted by memories of a species that had chosen transformation over extinction. We've had 50,000 years to perfect the art of survival, Captain. 50,000 years to become what we needed to become. He turned to face Mordane directly, his augmented eyes reflecting starlight like technological tears. Now we're going to teach that art to everyone else. The holographic display expanded to fill the observation deck, transforming the space into a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Mordane watched in growing comprehension as Admiral Rickstar manipulated the projection with subtle neural commands, highlighting trade routes, fleet positions, and colony worlds across hundreds of star systems. Your Dominion controls 47 systems, Rickstar began, his augmented fingers tracing pathways through the stellar cartography. The Silthani resonance holds 31. The Nexari collective has assimilated 23. Each of you believes yourselves to be the dominant force in your respective regions. Red markers appeared throughout the map, human observation stations, monitoring posts, intelligence-gathering networks. They were everywhere, hidden in asteroid fields, disguised as derelict hulks, embedded within the very trade routes that connected galactic civilization. You've been spying on us for millennia, Mordane said, his mandibles clicking with grudging admiration. We've been learning from you, Rickstar corrected. Every conquest, every technological innovation, every strategic adaptation, we've cataloged it all. Not to steal, but to understand the patterns of evolutionary pressure across different environments. The display zoomed in on the HFY home system, showing detailed scans of their industrial complexes, military installations, and population centers. But rather than the cold assessment of a potential conqueror, the data was presented with scientific precision, the work of researchers rather than invaders. HFY Prime, the Admiral continued. Gravity 1.3 standard, atmospheric composition, 78% nitrogen, 18% oxygen, 4% noble gases. Surface conditions, perpetual storm systems, acidic precipitation, tectonic instability averaging 8.2 on the Richter scale daily. Mordane's exoskeleton rippled with unease. The humans knew his world better than some of his own people. Your species evolved under extreme pressure, Richter observed, developing natural armor, redundant organ systems, and enhanced reflexes. Classic Deathworld adaptations. But you made a critical error, which was, you assumed that because you survived your world's challenges, you were prepared for the universe's challenges. The display shifted, showing comparative evolutionary charts, but HFY's pressures, while intense, were consistent, predictable. Your species adapted to specific environmental factors, and then stopped evolving. The projection expanded to show dozens of other worlds, each one a hellscape of impossible conditions. Planets where the atmosphere was pure methane, where gravity fluctuated randomly, where the surface was composed of crystallized time itself. Earth taught us something different, Richter said, his voice carrying the weight of species-wide trauma. It taught us that evolution never ends, that the moment you stop adapting, you start dying. Commander Velthan's voice echoed through the observation deck's communication systems. Admiral, we're receiving responses from the courier drones. All major powers have agreed to the conference. Mordane's compound eyes focused sharply. Conference. The Survival Symposium, Rickstar explained, manipulating the display to show fleet movements converging on a neutral system. Representatives from every major galactic power gathering to discuss a proposition that will determine the future of interstellar civilization. And what proposition is that? The Admiral's smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was the expression of a teacher, preparing to deliver a difficult lesson. Voluntary evolution, guided adaptation. The systematic transformation of galactic civilization from a collection of stagnant apex predators into something capable of surviving what's coming. The display shifted once more, this time showing astronomical data, deep space observations, gravitational anomaly readings, and exotic energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim. The data painted a picture that made Mordane's hemolymph run cold. The Andromeda Galaxy, he breathed. Collision course with the Milky Way, 2 trillion stars, countless worlds, and approximately 47 billion years of independent evolution all coming our way. Rickstar's augmented eyes reflected the data streams flowing around them. Our best projections give us 300,000 years before the gravitational interactions begin affecting stellar stability in this region. 300,000 years is an eternity, Mordane protested. 2 individuals, yes, 2 species, it's barely a moment. The Admiral gestured toward Earth, hanging in the distance like a memorial to transformation. We've spent 50,000 years preparing for our sun's instability. Imagine what we could accomplish with 300,000 years to prepare for galactic collision. The implications struck Mordane like a physical blow. A collision between galaxies would render current evolutionary advantages meaningless. Worlds would be torn from their orbits, star systems would be disrupted, and entire species would face extinction on a scale that made planetary disasters seem trivial. You want to transform every species in the galaxy, he said slowly. We want to save every species in the galaxy, Rickstar corrected. But salvation requires sacrifice. Survival demands evolution. And evolution. He paused, his expression growing distant. Evolution requires the wisdom to surrender what you are for what you must become. The holographic display condensed back to its original configuration, showing the current political boundaries that divided galactic civilization into competing powers. But now Mordain could see them for what they truly were, not empires or dominions or collectives, but isolated populations of static species, each one convinced of their own supremacy, while remaining blind to the cosmic forces that would soon render such distinctions irrelevant. The symposium, Rickstar continued, will present every major power with the same choice we faced 50,000 years ago: evolve or die. Transform yourselves into something capable of surviving impossible challenges, or remain as you are and accept extinction. Mordain studied the Admiral's augmented features, seeing not the face of a conqueror, but the visage of something far more dangerous, a prophet of necessary change. And if we refuse? Rickstar's smile revealed teeth that gleamed with metallic augmentation, while his eyes held the patient intensity of something that had already accepted its own death and been reborn from the experience. Then we'll make the choice for you. The neutral zone station Concordia had been constructed specifically for the survival symposium, a massive orbital platform positioned at the gravitational balance point between three major star systems. Its architecture spoke to human engineering, philosophy, beautiful in its functionality, elegant in its efficiency, and intimidating in its implications. Captain Mordain stood in the central assembly chamber, studying the gathered representatives of galactic civilization with the analytical precision his species had evolved for survival. The chamber itself was a marvel of adaptive architecture, its walls, floors, and atmospheric systems automatically adjusting to accommodate the environmental needs of 47 different species. To his left, the Silthani delegation maintained their characteristic formations, 7 crystalline beings whose faceted bodies refracted light into hypnotic patterns. Their leader, Resonance Prime Kelthus, communicated through harmonic frequencies that made the station's bulkheads hum with sympathetic vibration. Across the chamber, the Nexari Collective had sent a single representative, a drone designated as Consensus Node 7749, whose Katona's frame housed the distributed consciousness of 12 billion individual minds. It spoke in perfect unison with itself, each word carrying the weight of entire civilizations, and scattered throughout the assembly were dozens of other species: the vapor-wreathed Vorthani, the geometrically impossible Threkdar, the energy-based Pulsarians, whose very presence caused reality to flicker at the edges. Each one was an apex predator in their own right. Each one had conquered their evolutionary niche through violence, adaptation, and the relentless application of survival pressure. And each one was about to learn that apex predation was merely the first stage of evolution. Admiral Rickstar entered the chamber with the measured pace of someone who had already won a battle that hadn't yet begun. His augmented features were more pronounced here, under the harsh illumination of the assembly lights, neural interface ports gleaming like technological jewelry, eyes that held the luminescent depth of quantum-enhanced perception. Behind him came the rest of the human delegation. Commander Velthin, with her weapon-integrated cybernetics, Captain Tyrannus of the Relentless, whose skull-mounted processing arrays pulsed with data streams, and a dozen other representatives of post-human evolution. Honored delegates, Rickstar began, his voice carrying through the chamber's acoustic systems with perfect clarity. We gather today to discuss survival. Not the survival of individuals, or even of worlds, but the survival of consciousness itself, in a universe that has no obligation to preserve what we are. The holographic projectors activated, filling the chamber's central space with the same galactic map Mordain had seen aboard the Defiant. But this version was updated with real-time astronomical data, showing the inexorable approach of Andromeda as a vast spiral of destruction sliding toward their own galaxy. Collision is inevitable, the Admiral continued, his augmented fingers manipulating the display to show gravitational interaction models. In approximately 300,000 years, the merger of our galaxies will begin. Stars will be torn from their orbits. Planetary systems will be disrupted. Entire regions of space will become uninhabitable. Resonance prime Caiathis generated a harmonic that translated as skeptical dismissal. 300 millennia provide ample time for technological solutions. Planetary relocation, stellar engineering, habitat construction, technological solutions, Rickstar repeated, his smile carrying the patience of someone who had anticipated this objection. Tell me, Resonance Prime, how many of your people would be willing to abandon their crystalline forests? How many would accept transformation into forms capable of surviving in artificial habitats? The Silthani delegation fell silent, their refracted light patterns shifting to hues that suggested uncomfortable contemplation. Consensus Node 7749 spoke with the unanimous voice of the Nexari Collective. Adaptation through technological augmentation is acceptable. Hive mind consciousness already incorporates artificial intelligences. Integration presents no philosophical barriers. But would your collective maintain its current structure? Rickstar asked, when faced with environmental pressures that favor individual consciousness over hive mind unity. When survival requires the kind of rapid adaptation that distributed thinking cannot achieve. The Nexari representative's chitinous frame darkened, its compound eyes reflecting uncertainty. One by one, Admiral Rickstar addressed each delegation, each species, each representative of galactic civilization. His questions were precise, surgical, designed to expose the fundamental flaw in their evolutionary philosophy, the assumption that what they were was what they would always be. Evolution, he said finally, his voice carrying across the chamber like a funeral oration, is not a destination. It is a process, and that process requires one thing above all others, the willingness to surrender what you are for what you must become. The holographic display shifted, showing detailed scans of Earth's orbital installations. The defensive platforms that surrounded humanity's homeworld were revealed in their full complexity, not just weapons systems, but transformation centers. Factories of controlled evolution, where beings could be systematically altered to survive impossible challenges. We offer you a choice, Rickstar continued, his augmented eyes reflecting the light of the holographic stars. Join us willingly in the next phase of evolution. Allow us to guide your species through the transformation process, to become something capable of surviving galactic collision, stellar disruption, and the birth of a new cosmic order. Mordain found himself speaking before conscious thought could intervene, and if we refuse, the Admiral's smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was the expression of someone who had moved beyond such primitive concepts as mercy or malice. Then you will evolve anyway, but you will do so under the pressure of extinction rather than the guidance of wisdom. The chamber fell silent, except for the harmonic hum of life support systems, adapting to 47 different environmental requirements. In that silence, Mordain could hear the weight of decision settling upon every representative present. The universe, Rickstar said softly, does not negotiate with extinction. Neither do we. The survival symposium had begun, and with it, the transformation of galactic civilization from a collection of static apex predators into something worthy of inheriting the stars. Outside the station's viewports, Andromeda continued its inexorable approach, a spiral of creation and destruction sliding through the cosmic dark toward a collision that would reshape the very nature of existence. The age of stagnant evolution was ending. The age of guided transformation had begun, and humanity's augmented post-human humanity would be its architects. In the depths of space, where dying stars wrote epitaphs, in light and dark matter danced to the rhythm of entropy, to Deathworld species had collided. Only one had yielded, but, in yielding, The Kethvari had discovered something more valuable than conquest, the wisdom to evolve beyond the need for victory. The universe was vast, dangerous, and utterly indifferent to the dreams of apex predators. But for those willing to surrender what they were, for what they could become, it offered something infinitely more precious, the chance to survive the end of everything and emerge as something worthy of the stars themselves.